The Commonwealth War Graves Commission is an intergovernmental organization of 6 independent member states whose principal function is to mark, record and maintain the graves and places of commemoration of Commonwealth of Nations military service members who died in the 2 World Wars. The Commission is also responsible for commemorating Commonwealth civilians who died as a result of enemy action during World War II. The Commission was founded by Fabian Ware and constituted through Royal Charter in 1917, named the Imperial War Graves Commission. The change to the present name took place in 1960. The Commission, as part of its mandate, is responsible for commemorating all Commonwealth war dead individually and equally. To this end, the war dead are commemorated by name on a headstone, at an identified site of a burial, or on a memorial. War dead are commemorated uniformly and equally, irrespective of military or civil rank, race or creed. The Commission is currently responsible for the continued commemoration of 1.7 million deceased Commonwealth military service members in 153 countries. Since its inception, the Commission has constructed approximately 2,500 war cemeteries and numerous memorials. The Commission is currently responsible for the care of war dead at over 23,000 separate burial sites and the maintenance of more than 200 memorials worldwide. In addition to commemorating Commonwealth military service members, the Commission maintains, under arrangement with applicable governments, over 40,000 non-Commonwealth war graves and over 25,000 non-war military and civilian graves. The Commission operates through the continued financial support of the member states, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, India and South Africa. The current president of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission is Prince Edward, Duke of Kent. History: World War I. On the outbreak of World War I in 1914, Fabian Ware, a director of the Rio Tinto Company, found that at 45 years old he was too old to join the British Army. He used the influence of Rio Tinto chairman Viscount Milner to become the commander of a mobile unit of the British Red Cross. He arrived in France in September 1914, and whilst there was struck by the lack of any official mechanism for documenting and marking the location of graves of those who had been killed, and felt compelled to create an organization within the Red Cross for this purpose. In March 1915, with the support of Neville Macready, Adjutant General of the British Expeditionary Force, Ware's work was given official recognition and support by the Imperial War Office, and the unit was transferred to the British Army as the Graves Registration Commission. The new Graves Registration Commission had over 31,000 graves of British and Imperial soldiers registered by October 1915 and 50,000 registered by May 1916. When municipal graveyards began to overfill, Ware began negotiations with various local authorities to acquire land for further cemeteries. Ware began with an agreement with France to build joint British and French cemeteries under the understanding that these would be maintained by the French government. Ware eventually concluded that it was not prudent to leave the maintenance responsibilities solely to the French government, and subsequently arranged for France to purchase the land, grant it in perpetuity, and leave the management and maintenance responsibilities to the British. The French government agreed under the condition that cemeteries respected certain dimensions, were accessible by public road, were in the vicinity of medical aid stations, and were not too close to towns or villages. Similar negotiations were started with the Belgian government. As reports of the grave registration work became public, the Commission began to receive letters of inquiry and requests for photographs of graves from relatives of deceased soldiers. By 1917, 17,000 photographs had been dispatched to relatives. In March 1915, the Commission, with the support of the Red Cross, began to dispatch photographic prints and cemetery location information in answer to the requests. The Graves Registration Commission became the Directorate of Graves Registration and Inquiries in the spring of 1916 in recognition of the fact that the scope of work began to extend beyond simple grave registration and began to include responding to inquiries from relatives of those killed. The Directorate's work was also extended beyond the Western Front and into other theaters of war, with units deployed in Greece, Egypt and Mesopotamia. Formal establishment as the war continued. Ware and others became concerned about the fate of the graves in the post-war period. Following a suggestion by the British Army, the National Committee for the Care of Soldiers' Graves was appointed by the British government in January 1916, with Edward, Prince of Wales, agreeing to serve as president. The National Committee for the Care of Soldiers' Graves was created with the intention of taking over the work of the Directorate of Graves Registration and Inquiries after the war. The government felt that it was more appropriate to entrust the work to a specially appointed body rather than to any existing government department. By early 1917, a number of members of the committee believed a formal imperial organization would be needed to care for the graves. With the help of Edward, Prince of Wales, Ware submitted a memorandum to the Imperial War Conference in 1917 suggesting that an imperial organization be constituted. The suggestion was accepted, and on the 21st of May 1917, the Imperial War Graves Commission was established by royal charter, with the Prince of Wales serving as President, Secretary of State for War Lord Derby as Chairman and Ware as Vice-Chairman. The Commission's undertakings began in earnest at the end of the First World War. Once land for cemeteries and memorials had been guaranteed, the enormous task of recording the details of the dead could begin. By 1918, some 587,000 graves had been identified and a further 559,000 casualties were registered as having no known grave. The scale and associated high number of casualties of the war produced an entirely new attitude towards the commemoration of war dead. Previous to World War I, individual commemoration of war dead was often on an ad hoc basis and was almost exclusively limited to commissioned officers. However, the war required mobilization of a significant percentage of the population, either as volunteers or through conscription. An expectation had consequently arisen that individual soldiers would expect to be commemorated, even if they were low-ranking members of the military. A committee under Frederick Kenyon, director of the British Museum, presented a report to the Commission in November 1918 detailing how it envisioned the development of the cemeteries. Two key elements of this report were that bodies should not be repatriated and that uniform memorials should be used to avoid class distinctions. Beyond the logistical nightmare of returning home so many corpses, it was felt that repatriation would conflict with the feeling of brotherhood that had developed between serving ranks. An article in The Times on the 17th of February 1919 by Rudyard Kipling carried the Commission's proposal to a wider audience and described what the graves would look like. The article, entitled War Graves, Work of Imperial Commission, Mr. Kipling's survey, was quickly republished as an illustrated booklet, Graves of the Fallen. The illustrated booklet was intended to soften the impact of Kenyon's report, as it included illustrations of cemeteries with mature trees and shrubs, contrasting the bleak landscapes depicted in published battlefield photos. There was an immediate public outcry following the publication of the reports, particularly with regards to the decision to not repatriate their bodies of the dead. The reports generated considerable discussion in the press, which ultimately led to a heated debate in Parliament on the 4th of May 1920. Sir James Remnant started the debate. followed by speeches by William Burdett Coutts in favor of the Commission's principles and Robert Cecil speaking for those desiring repatriation, and opposing uniformity of grave markers. Winston Churchill closed the debate and asked that the issue not proceed to a vote. Remnant withdrew his motion, allowing the Commission to carry out its work assured of support for its principles. First, cemeteries and memorials to the missing. Three of the most eminent architects of the day, Sir Herbert Baker, Sir Reginald Blomfield, and Sir Edwin Lutyens, were commissioned to design the cemeteries and memorials. Rudyard Kipling was appointed literary advisor for the language used for memorial inscriptions. In 1920, the Commission built 3 experimental cemeteries at Le Treport, Forceville and Louvencourt, following the principles outlined in the Kenyon Report. Of these, the Forceville Communal Cemetery and Extension was agreed to be the most successful. Having consulted with garden designer Gertrude Jekyll, the architects created a walled cemetery with uniform headstones in a garden setting, augmented by Blomfield's Cross of Sacrifice and Lutyens' Stone of Remembrance. After some adjustments, Forceville became the template for the Commission's building program. Adjustments were required because all 3 experimental cemeteries went over budget. To ensure future cemeteries remained within the budget, the Commission decided to not build shelters in cemeteries that contained less than 200 graves, to not place a stone of remembrance in any cemetery with less than 400 graves, and to limit the height of cemetery walls to 1 meter. At the end of 1919, the Commission had spent £7,500, and this figure rose to £250,000 in 1920 as construction of cemeteries and memorials increased. By 1921, the Commission had established 1,000 cemeteries which were ready for headstone erections and burials. Between 1920 and 1923, the Commission was shipping 4,000 headstones a week to France. In many cases, small cemeteries were closed and the graves concentrated in larger ones. By 1927, when the majority of construction had been completed, over 500 cemeteries had been built, with 400,000 headstones, 1,000 crosses of sacrifice, and 400 stones of remembrance. The Commission had also been mandated to individually commemorate each soldier who had no known grave, which amounted to 315,000 in France and Belgium alone. The Commission initially decided to build 12 monuments on which to commemorate the missing, each memorial being located at the site of an important battle along the Western Front. After resistance from the French committee responsible for the approvals of memorials on French territory, the Commission revised the plan and reduced the number of memorials, and in some cases built in memorials to the missing in existing cemeteries rather than as separate structures. Reginald Blomfield's Menon Gate was the first memorial to the missing located in Europe to be completed, and was unveiled on the 24th of July 1927. The Menon Gate was found to have insufficient space to contain all the names as originally planned, and 34,984 names of the missing were instead inscribed on Herbert Baker's Tyncott Memorial to the Missing. Other memorials followed: the Hells Memorial in Gallipoli designed by John James Burnett, the Thiepval Memorial on the Somme, and the Arras Memorial designed by Edwin Lutyens, and the Basra Memorial in Iraq designed by Edward Priolo Warren. The Dominions in India also erected memorials on which they commemorated the missing: the Neuve Chapelle Memorial for the Forces of India, the Vimy Memorial by Canada, the Villers-Bretonneux Memorial by Australia, the Delville Wood Memorial by South Africa and the Beaumont Hamel Memorial by Newfoundland. The program of commemorating the dead of the Great War was considered essentially complete with the inauguration of the Thiepval Memorial in 1932, though the Vimy Memorial would not be finished until 1936, the Villers-Bretonneux Memorial until 1938, and stonemasons were still conducting work on the Menin Gate when Germany invaded Belgium in 1940. The only memorial created by the Commission that was not in the form of a monument or cemetery was the Ophthalmic Institute at Giza, Egypt, complete with library, and bacteriology and pathology departments, as its memorial to men of the Egyptian Labor Corps and Camel Transport Corps. Its erection was agreed with local political pressure. World War II. From the start of the Second World War in 1939, the Commission organized grave registration units and planning ahead based on the experience gained from the First World War, earmarked land for use as cemeteries. When the war began turning in favor of the Allies, the Commission was able to begin restoring its First World War cemeteries and memorials. It also began the task of commemorating the 600,000 Commonwealth casualties from the Second World War. In 1949, the Commission completed Jep Canadian War Cemetery, the first of 559 new cemeteries and 36 new memorials. Eventually, over 350,000 new headstones were erected. Many were made from Hopton woodstone. The wider scale of World War II, coupled with manpower shortages and unrest in some countries, meant that the construction and restoration programs took much longer. Following the war, the Commission implemented a 5-year horticultural renovation program. The horticultural neglect was largely addressed by 1950, but there were necessary structural repairs to be made. These, together with the backlog of maintenance tasks from before the war, took a further 10 years to complete, and the program was not completed until the 1960s. With the increased number of civilian casualties compared with the World War I, Winston Churchill agreed to Ware's proposal that the Commission also maintain a record of Commonwealth civilian war deaths. A supplemental chapter was added to the Imperial War Graves Commission's charter on 7 February 1941, empowering the organization to collect and record the names of civilians who died from enemy action during the Second World War, which resulted in the creation of the Civilian War Dead Roll of Honor. The roll eventually contained the names of nearly 67,000 civilians. The Commission and the Dean of Westminster reached an agreement that the roll would eventually be placed in Westminster Abbey, but not until the roll was complete and hostilities had ended. The Commission handed over the first 6 volumes to the Dean of Westminster on the 21st of February 1956. The final volume was added to the showcase in 1958. Post-World War II. Following World War II, the Commission recognized that the word "imperial" within its name was no longer appropriate. In the spirit of strengthening national and regional feelings, the organization's name was changed to Commonwealth War Graves Commission in 1960. More recent conflicts have sometimes made it impossible for the Commission to care for cemeteries in a given region or resulted in the destruction of sites altogether. Zahrinsdorf Indian Cemetery in Germany was unkempt after the end of World War II and until the German reunification because it was located in an area occupied by Russian forces and was not entirely rebuilt until 2005. The Six-Day War and War of Attrition resulted in the destruction of Port Tewfik Memorial and Aden Memorial, and the death of a commission gardener at Suez War Memorial Cemetery. During the Lebanese Civil War, 2 cemeteries in Beirut were destroyed and had to be rebuilt. The maintenance of war graves and memorials in Iraq has remained difficult since Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, with regular maintenance being impractical since after the Gulf War. The Commission has, and continues to, also provide support for war graves outside its traditional mandate. In 1982, the British Ministry of Defence requested the Commission's assistance to design and construct cemeteries in the Falkland Islands for those killed during the Falklands War. Although these cemeteries are not Commonwealth War Graves Commission cemeteries, the Commission manages the administrative responsibilities of these cemeteries. Since 2005, the Commission has carried out similar management duties on behalf of the British Ministry of Defence for cemeteries and graves of British and Imperial soldiers who died during the Second Boer War. In 2003, Veterans Affairs Canada employed the Commission to develop an approach to locate grave markers for which the Canadian Minister of Veterans Affairs has responsibility. As of 2011, the Commission conducts a 12-year cyclical inspection program of Canadian veterans markers installed at the expense of the Government of Canada. In 2008, an exploratory excavation discovered mass graves on the edge of Pheasant Wood outside of Fremells. 250 British and Australian bodies were excavated from 5 mass graves which were interred in the newly constructed Fremells Military Cemetery. This was the first new Commonwealth War Graves Commission cemetery in more than 50 years, the last such cemeteries having been built after the Second World War.